Okay, at 6:01, I will call tonight's meeting of the Capital Planning Committee of Wednesday, October 26, 2022. To order. We are in the Ritter Building Lower Conference Room. In accordance with the requirements of the opening meeting law, please be advised. Hold on a second. I don't see that this is tracking.
Mine starts.
Okay. Apologize. No, it's fine. Tracking. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and it may be broadcast live over the Lunenburg Public Access channel, but it isn't tonight. But it will be uploaded to the Lunenburg Access YouTube within 24 hours after the meeting's conclusion. If you wish to join the meeting via Zoom on any smart device, the webinar ID for tonight is 909-174-0347. If you wish to join by phone, you can do so by dialing 888-475-4499. And once again, the webinar ID is 909-174-0347. The posted agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at this meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. Tonight, let's just call the roll because it's a Zoom meeting. So, Mr. Martin.
Here.
Mr. Passios.
Here.
Mr. Beardmore.
Here.
Mr. Brenner.
Here.
And I, Tom Alonso, chair, am here. So tonight we'll be hearing from the school department's capital planning request. But before we do, we will start with if there's any public comment from the committee members. Seeing none, any public comment from the public? All right, also seeing none. So let us jump right in. I don't know who's presenting. I'm assuming the superintendent is presenting. Maybe not. I don't know. I will share my screen, so we will follow along with the presentation, but after introductions.
Good evening, everyone. Kate Byrne, Superintendent of Schools, and this is Steve Pusateri. He's our new facility director. He joined the school department August 1st.
Welcome. Thanks.
Right, so let me share a window here. First, so that we start on the planning requests. Criteria, okay, that's not highlighted, criteria, presentation. Okay. We can minimize.
Students for later reference. And everything gets shuffled around.
Okay. Oh, it's this one. Got too many screens here. Okay.
Alrighty, so I think we can move to the next slide. which I
Yeah.
think.
I
you
get
just
to
need
run,
this
I get to
role.
run everything, don't worry, yeah. I get to run the meeting, run the Zoom, run this. I can do your presentation if you want to.
Okay,
Denied.
all right, so we thought we'd start by recapping the projects that were approved as part of the capital plan last year for this current fiscal year. The first was air conditioning project for the primary school. We had a lot of questions about that at the spring annual town meeting. And we did some investigative work, working with several engineers over the summer. And the newest estimate we had for that project makes it absolutely not feasible at this time. But we are exploring other alternatives that we will follow up with potentially this spring. We had a replacement mower and a replacement 1-ton dump truck with a plow. So we'll give you a brief overview broken down by school for the next 10-year window. So in the 10-year plan for the primary school, we've listed security upgrades for FY24, replacement of the playground equipment and installation in FY25, some work in 25 and 27 on a driveway expansion for the primary school because it's rather narrow when people are parked along the side of the entry drive. And gas condensing boilers in 27. You'll notice there's an asterisk there. That price tag assumes that there'd be some MSBA, the Mass, the School Business Authority.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very quick comment. That one, I think we could get Green Communities funding for also.
Okay.
So where it's out to 27, that's good timing
Okay,
for us to look at that.
very good. Next slide. Turkey Hill, you'll see many projects listed here for Turkey Hill. This is our oldest school building. In FY24, we're looking at security upgrades for access control, door contacts, additional cameras for security, replacement of the exterior doors, an upgrade to the fire alarm system. And in the out years, looking at floor tile replacement, roof replacement, ADA modifications, window replacement, HVAC upgrade, and some work on the electrical systems as well. Again, you'll see that there are asterisks there. We would be anticipating some reimbursement funding for those projects as well. Sprinkler system, plumbing system, replacement of the elevator, and an upgrade for classroom technology. For the middle high school, we would be looking to do some renovation, repair, upgrade to the athletic complex. We'll get into that a little bit later with some pictures. The cost that you see listed there, honestly, it's a guess at this point. We have no estimates from engineers, et cetera, et cetera. What we're looking for in the FY24 capital requests would be the funds to do a study so that we could get a handle on what all of the repairs would cost and how we might be able to spread the repairs out over several years' time. But again, we anticipate that it could potentially be a rather costly project. But again, that $2 million figure is not based on anything concrete. District-wide, safety window film for all of the schools, purchase of a pickup truck with plow, passenger van. Again, another replacement for a mower in the out years, as well as another pickup truck with a plow further out in the 10-year look ahead. So now we'll get into the projects that we've brought forward for consideration for FY24. So here's a one slide overview of the projects that we're looking to bring forward for consideration for FY24 in a priority order. The safety window film district-wide, exterior door replacement at Turkey Hill, access and security upgrades at both the primary school and Turkey Hill Elementary, the upgrade to the fire alarm system at Turkey Hill, that athletic complex feasibility study for the middle high school track turf area, and a new pickup truck. So we'll look at the safety and security initiatives first. The safety window film project cost $160,000. As you can see on this particular slide, this is at the primary school. There are several areas and doors that have larger panes of glass. The film allows for greater security. So I just want this image of, so that you understand where the areas of the building that we're looking at installing the film. The next slide shows you Turkey Hill Elementary School. And to the left of the screen, that's the front entrance to the building. You can see there's a great big wall of windows at the front of the building. And then if you look at the right-hand side, that's along the side of the building. It's tucked in a little bit behind the front entrance. And you see a setup like that on both sides of the building, where you have large, basically almost floor to ceiling panels of glass.
So, I'm sorry, so what does this window film?
Well, I think.
We'll get there.
Yeah,
And
let's
let's jumping ahead.
we're gonna do the whole presentation, we can go back and we can ask
Okay.
questions. Let's go through the presentation. I guess I should have laid out that first.
And then this shows you some images of the middle high school.
I'm assuming silence means you want me to go forward. Okay.
Thank you. All right, so this project, we would be looking to install safety film for the inside of all exterior doors that have glass panels and the inside of all accessible large windows on the first floor. The application of the film will deter intrusion from the exterior by creating a barrier that prevents plate glass from immediately shattering, allowing immediate access. With the film applied, it would typically take an intruder approximately 90 to 120 seconds, 2 minutes, to completely kick in any glass that they're looking to gain access to the building. When you've got an intruder attempting to get into a building, that 2 minutes buys you response time. Somebody can call 911. There could be a police response before an intruder actually gains access to the building. Additionally, the application of the film decreases solar glare into the rooms, decreasing the heat load in the building, and therefore decreasing any cooling costs for the building. And it's just, I think, noteworthy that the tint on the film is barely noticeable, and it really does not impact sightline from the exterior, which may be important in certain situations to have a sightline into the building. So also under the safety and security, the exterior door replacement at the Turkey Hill Elementary. You can see that's the main entrance of the Turkey Hill Elementary School. It's the only school building that we have that does not have a double door access to the building. In other words, if you go to the middle high school, you have to gain entry through one set of doors. Then you're into a vestibule area. You don't have immediate access into the building. You'd have to be granted access through a second set of doors to gain entry into the building. We have that same setup down at the primary school. Two sets of doors before you would have entry into the building. This is the only school that we do not have that situation. So in addition to replacing doors around the building, we'd also be looking to build out a vestibule and add a second set of doors. So here are some photographs of the doors. It can be challenging to see, but the photo that's on the left side of the screen, I think it's maybe most obvious if you look across the bottom of the doors. You can see that the door that would be on the right side, it's not sitting flush with the door on the left side. These are antiquated locking mechanisms, and they, over many years, become a little bit unreliable. So in this particular situation, a staff member would actually have to make some adjustment and pull the door to make sure that it's properly latched. So this door replacement project, we would be looking to have the installation of an additional front entrance, making it consistent with the other schools, as I described, by creating a vestibule where visitors would have to be buzzed in through two sets of doors to gain access to the building. We would also be looking to install new exterior doors, which would provide an enhanced, more reliable security. As I mentioned, the existing doors have an antiquated locking mechanism that staff would really have to be, they do have to be vigilant to make sure that the doors are closed and latched properly. It's important to note that this door replacement project would have to be done prior to the other project that we have listed for FY24, which is the access control upgrade. So now the access control upgrade. You have some photographs of existing cameras and security panel for alarm in the building. In this particular project, this one here is for the primary school. Essentially, you can scroll past the next couple of slides because the project is the exact same description. We'd be looking to do the same project at the Turkey Hill Elementary School. And you can see we actually have a wireless camera on the front door to have better visibility of folks outside, because the current camera buzzer system that we have does not give a good picture of the person at the entry.
Isn't that a wire?
Yep.
Somebody said it was wire.
It's powered,
Oh.
but it transmits the image
Okay.
wirelessly. So the project for both the primary school and Turkey Hill, in terms of the upgrades for access, we would be looking to install enhanced security on the vestibule that we would be creating at Turkey Hill, upgrading the door access controls and the alarm keypad, The system would be the same as what is currently in the middle high school. This would allow access cards to be programmed to arm and disarm the system, eliminating the issue of having to remember multi-digit codes in order to disarm the alarm. There would be one monitoring system district-wide. This would also allow easier management of access in terms of employees onboarding and offboarding. It's as simple as going into your computer and programming to activate an access card and deactivate an access card. There would be some additional security cameras at all exterior doors and other areas inside the building, as well as mounted cameras outside to view the playground area. This upgrade would provide greater security video coverage and also have some increased video quality. And we would also be looking to add some additional motion detectors. Having all 3 school buildings controlled by one system, as we said, the accessibility for each school is simplified, not having multiple key cards for multiple buildings, but one. Additionally, this provides our police department very quick access to any building in an emergency situation. Our district safety team has members of the police and fire department on it. And we all agree that having a key card available in a cruiser, if anything happens with that key card, they can access any doorway of any building that has the card reader. So they don't necessarily have to go to the main entrance, gain, the key from the Knox box, open the door. All of that is just seconds, minutes that slow down the response in an emergency situation. So having this universal system will be helpful not only for us in the school department, but we think it will be a great asset for our safety personnel as well.
Can I just add one
Yes.
thing? What this also helps with is it eliminates every time when someone else needs to get in the building on a weekend and says, hey, Bob, what's your code so I can use it for Saturday? It completely eliminates that. So that's another reason for an upgrade, because that unfortunately, does happen.
The next project, still under the safety projects, is the upgrade to the fire alarm system at Turkey Hill Elementary. And that's just a visual image there of the setup for some of the fire alarm system equipment. That's at the main entrance area of the school. For this project, the upgrades would include new smoke detectors. We would be adding additional smoke detectors throughout the building. We would be upgrading and adding fire alarm pull stations and a new fire alarm panel and a system with a panel interface screen. This particular system is original to the building, and an upgrade of the system will bring the system into compliance with current code. It will also reduce the risk of a system failure due to the age of the system. So the next area is planning. And that's the request for funding for the athletic complex feasibility study. You can see there an aerial view of our beautiful turf and track, located just behind the middle high school. So we wanted to show you some of the current conditions. What you see here is the block retaining wall along the track around the turf. You can see that the fence that sits atop the retaining wall is significantly, obviously, leaning. And you can see the blocks for the pathway, the walkway toward the bleachers, is in that photograph to the left. There's another shot of the fence and the wall along the track. On the right-hand side, you can see some of that drainage area along the track. We'll get to some photos, very recent photos, to display the water issues. Those were taken
This morning.
this morning. So it's been raining for a couple of days. And this is the challenge with the track and the turf field. It doesn't drain. And there have been times, depending on the amount of water, that portions of the turf actually sort of float on the water. Which, if you used it under those conditions, you would damage the turf for sure. These are also photographs. On the left side, you can see the block wall that sits under the press box. That's the press box that you can see in that photograph there. And this wall is right behind the bleachers on the other side of that fence. And you can see that even the fence here is leaning, and you can see that there's some deterioration of the concrete blocks in that wall as well. These pictures show you access to the press box, as well as photographs of the fence and the concrete wall on the other side of the press box. This picture would be taken from the side of the building closest to Turkey Hill Elementary. So with this project, we would be looking to engage a civil engineer to come in and look at the drainage problems on and around the perimeter of the turf, the drainage issues leading to the failure of the small block retaining wall and walkway, the drainage issues leading to the failure of the bin block, large concrete block retaining wall supporting the press box just behind the bleachers. And we would also look into the possible expansion of the snack shack restrooms. And we really are in great need of storage for athletic equipment. So if there were a possible way to add storage capability, we would like to know the engineer's thoughts on that as well. The feasibility study will allow us to determine whether or not the project's viable, whether or not we can prioritize and do projects over time. And we would have a better sense of the cost of the renovations and repairs that are needed on the athletic complex. And then we're into the operations projects. So currently, the inventory of vehicles in the department, we will have 3. The one that was approved for purchase in this fiscal year, we're anticipating delivery, but it's not pictured here. those are the other two vehicles, along with the brand new one that we are purchasing this year, that are in the fleet. And you can see there the age and the mileage. This particular vehicle was the hand-me-down from the
DPW.
DPW. And you can see that there's so much rot in the bed that the bed is now a plywood insert into the dump body of the truck. And the next pictures will give you a close-up look at the rest of the truck. So this request would be for the purchase of a pickup truck. We'd be looking to purchase a 3/4 ton pickup with a plow and a sander to replace the 17-year-old.
Yeah, the
17-year-old vehicle, the 2006. We're asking to include the sander because this would reduce our reliance on the DPW to provide salting services on school grounds as needed. Sometimes, by the time we have a delayed open and we've cleared everything, many of the DPW workers might have been sent home because they've been out all night clearing the roads. And we need somebody to come in and salt the driveway that's been cleared. We have had times where, we'll have an event at the middle high school, a basketball game, let's say, and as people are starting to leave the game, parking lot is really slick. Obviously, when our DPW staff have been out working all night, I don't think that it's really reasonable to expect them to hop in a truck and come on down at 10 o'clock in the evening to, take care of the driveway or the parking lot. But not doing that leaves us in a spot of liability if someone were to be injured on the ice. The dump body on that truck that we showed you, again, has extensive rust. The hoist is inoperable, and a new vehicle will ensure reliability in addition to reducing our reliance on the DPW. So in summary, we'll look at this singular slide again that lists out all of the projects. Again, in the order of priority in our assessment. When we presented these projects and this priority list to the school committee, they also agreed that this would be the priority list that they would support. So thank you very much for listening.
Okay, so thank you for the presentation. Let's leave this slide up. And I'll go back in the presentation as needed. So let's, first of all, does anybody have any opening comments about the presentation? From the committee?
If I could, I'd really like to congratulate you on putting together something that at least I have not seen in a number of years, outlining the needs of each individual building. Maybe there's been some of this information available in the background, but it's never been brought forward in the public. This will start to explain to the taxpayers what needs to be done to buildings as we move forward and make decisions about buildings. Thank you.
Mr. Beardmore.
Yeah, I do have a couple of comments here. First, in terms of the long-term capital plan that Mr. Passios just alluded to, this was discussed, the issues around the, what now amount to about $15 million of capital plans associated with Turkey Hill. You know, in our years on the finance committee, it's always been kind of a slightly comical issue because those numbers have always been considered placeholders that we probably will not spend because we're going to look to do a renovation or a replacement of Turkey Hill in the out years, end of the decade, and that would be an MSBA type of project. The reality that's kind of come around over the course of the last couple of months is due to our borrowing capacity as a community, which is limited. There's about $42 million of borrowing capacity over the next 10 years. And the needs that we have with municipal buildings that the Municipal Building Committee is working on right now. The reality of lining up all of the costs associated with dealing with municipal buildings and a major renovation or replacement of Turkey Hill inside of the next 10 to 15 years is improbable. And that, I hate to be the one to say that because I truly believe that we need a program-oriented elementary school at some point that is modern. But the financial reality kind of is what it is. And this is going to be a topic that the school committee is going to have to wrestle with over the course of the next several weeks and months. But my reason for outlining that is I think that $15 million is much more likely to be needed today than it was a month or a year ago, given the circumstances that have unfolded in terms of the financial realities and the municipal building plans. So, Mr. Passios, to your point, I think what we've seen today is a pretty accurate representation of the needs that we can see today over the course of the next 10-ish years. And, you know, if we do that, those types of projects, hopefully, Turkey Hill will be a viable building for another 50 years or so, right? I mean, but we need to, I mean, I'm being careful to say if, because I don't know what the eventuality is, but I just think that those asterisked things on the capital plan are, I consider to be substantially different today than I considered them to be a year ago.
And it really wouldn't be prudent to leave them largely in the out years of the 10-year plan. Because when you accept MSBA funding, you are making a commitment to keeping the building operational as a school for 10 years post-project. So honestly, I think some of the conversation that we'll have at the school committee is trying to prioritize and move some of those projects up so that they're done over the next handful of years, so that we can make that commitment of 10 years with no projects, anticipating that that would put the town in a better spot to be able to fund a new school.
So the other point that I wanted to make, really briefly, and I would ask the committee to think very carefully about how you want to approach this. There are some very sensitive security items that are on this list that were considered as a result of things that have occurred over the course of the last couple of years. In my view, they are critical. And we have brought to bear experts on these matters. Some of them are sitting in the room here today that can vouch for that. But I do want to be careful about scenarios and hypotheticals in this conversation, because this is a public meeting.
But on the other hand, we can't sit back and say, oh, that doesn't happen in a small town in New England.
We
That's
cannot.
right. We don't want to be the Massachusetts school on the national news.
Correct.
Anybody else?
The only question I would have, and again, I haven't followed it closely, I did a real quick search right as I sat down, but I know after incidents over the past 10 years, Homeland Security and federal money has flowed to, the states that had the incidents, but is there other money flowing out of the federal government for projects of this type for school campus security? And can some of this cost be deferred by that?
Potentially.
And I'm not saying wait for it, but
Nope. I believe that there was school security funding as part of that bill passed at the federal level around gun safety, et cetera. The governor just a couple of months ago announced 40 million for school safety and security, but that spans preschools, not like the primary school, but small preschools
Mhm.
all the way up through higher ed. Additionally, there was some reference to matching funds, but we have heard nothing more since the press release about details on, is it a competitive grant? What are the priorities that they would select and award grant monies for? We've heard nothing,
Mhm.
nothing. So I don't know that we would be receiving monies in an amount that would cover much of what we outlined here tonight. And if it comes to pass that, the district would have to put up matching funds, again, we would still need to be looking at likely at a capital plan level request.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go, let me put it back on the screen and we'll go item by item and see if anybody has questions. So the safety window film. If we need to go back, I can certainly go back. I know this has a safety element and I see we have two officers with the chief and an officer. I don't know if they want to speak to it. I assume that's why you're here. Either that or you're just attending, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming along. I think I have to echo Mr. Beard's words. I want to be careful of how we answer questions and how we present this. Think of this as an overall comprehensive plan to the safety and security of our schools. It's not a pixie dust that's going to fix everything that's out there. That's not the idea behind this. The idea is it is one part of a comprehensive plan. I want to be careful of how we present this, any type of detailed information, just because this is a public meeting. And I can assure you, this is something that we've met about in our safety meetings with the superintendent. And this has been ongoing discussions, I believe, since the beginning of summer. About these and what we have identified that we should be looking at to correct the issues that we see. And I think I got to commend the superintendent and his staff that they've taken a hard look and said, yeah, this is what we need to do and make sure that our children and our staff in those schools are safe.
So while I can appreciate the security issues, I can't believe that Windows film is something that people couldn't look up. And by the way, this is a public meeting by definition, and this group is tasked with discussing it. So saying that we shouldn't discuss it in a public meeting, I would ask, why did you present it in a public meeting? So we are going to discuss it, and as long as we don't get any details on response plan from the police, I think it's fair that if people have questions, they should ask questions about the efficacy of the film. And that's, I'm not saying I personally question it, but I don't want to leave it so that we can't talk about these things.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I do have some questions about the film.
Please.
I want to open with two things. One is I recognize that my understanding of classroom safety is dated. I was a high school teacher up through 12 years ago. So I know that my info is about a decade out of date. I haven't followed numbers closely since then, but I am a numbers guy. And at the time, there was again the same kind of tragedies we've seen recently I gather some of the ones recently have been worse. So, but numbers wise, and I prefer numbers for emotionally charged issues. While there were people who were very concerned, the reality was school was still by far orders of magnitude almost safer than anywhere else in students' lives. That even with the spate of school shootings and everything that was happening at that time, kids were safer at school than they were in their own home. So, I mean, my reason for, I am about school safety. I got my 2 reasons right over there, on the tablets. But I guess my question is, are schools still the safest place for kids? I guess that'd be my opening question. Is that still the case, or is that different now? I don't know the answer, so I'm asking.
If you want me to answer that, I would say yes, absolutely.
I would too.
But one tragedy is too many, right? I mean, if you want to be realistic about this, this is the most precious thing we have in this world. And if you think about school safety, absolutely they're safe. That's where kids belong, and they should feel safe. And that's, that's an environment that they should feel safe, as well as the staff. If you're gonna ask me, is it still the safest place for a kid? Absolutely, no doubt.
And I guess that I'm trying to wrap my mind around some of it because, I mean, we could be building cars that has very close to 0 fatalities, but we don't, because although it's an awful thing to have to say, there's a cost benefit analysis that goes into these things. And no one wants to say there's a cost benefit analysis for human lives, especially kids. That rips your heart out, but it's a reality. So I guess with that, I don't want to get into the things the police need to keep, the things they need to know that they're doing, and we don't need to scream from the rooftops, and that's fine. I guess I'm trying to wrap my mind around the likelihood of the windows having a 90 to 120 second break time actually making a material difference. Well, I mean, what's the real likelihood of that mattering?
So I'll speak to that.
Okay.
If you watched the video, the security film that came out of that school in Uvalde, Texas, the shooting, the bulk of the shooting occurred under the first 2 minutes. That particular intruder did not gain access through a broken panel of glass. But if that were the only access, because all of the doors were securely locked, but I can shoot out a window and walk right through, that 1.5 to 2 minute time that it would take them to punch through and punch out the entire glass panel is enough time to get police on scene.
It is.
And saves countless lives. If you look at that scenario from Texas.
Can I make a comment to that too? Also? Sure. I received an email too about this and about the information about this, about kind of like a false sense of security, or whatever it is. And the idea of even having officers in every building, which we tried, right? We try to get our SROs in there. So if we can delay an entry into a building as an active shooter is delayed, even if that officer is in that building, it gives that officer an opportunity to get to the area where it's occurring. If that entry is immediate, that officer is at a disadvantage right away. Right? We want to give the best advantage we can to our first responders that are going for that may be in that building, that give them an opportunity to get there and stop this before it starts.
And it also gives everyone in the building an opportunity to get out.
Correct.
And you can clear a building in 2 minutes.
Correct. Thank you.
Mr. Beardmore.
So a couple items for perspective, just to kind of address the risk issue. So I don't have an education background, but I do work in security as it relates to IT and technology and corporate communications. And so just as a baseline, does everybody understand what risk means? So risk is actually a really simple calculation. It's probability times magnitude. Okay. It is a math equation at the end of the day. The problem is that we're dealing with extremes here. We're dealing with very low probabilities and very high magnitudes. But if you can reduce both the probability and the magnitude by making strategic decisions and investments, then in my view, you are making very wise decisions. And all of these potentially reduce both the probability and the magnitude by deterring, by slowing, and by adding to the ability for first responders to respond across the board for all of these. There's one other point I wanted to make, and it just kind of got past me.
I'll offer this on your comment. The magnitude is not just the lives lost in the incident. It's all the trauma that is experienced by all of the other survivors, by the parents. It is a traumatic event for the entire community to recover from. It's not just number of, there's a huge ripple impact that will take years to recover from for the entire community. So I just want to make sure that when we're talking about a scenario like that, that everybody's aware that it's more than just a number of fatalities.
So you prompted my other here to this, and I understand it's very difficult to separate the numbers from the emotional side of this. I'm incapable of doing it, to be really blunt about it. I do my best, and I'm constantly checking myself on these kinds of things. So by means of just comparison, you saw the numbers that are being asked for today. We spent $3 million last year-ish on our capital plan. Off the top of your head, can you rattle off 6 of those 18 items? My point here is that in terms of the potential impact that these investments can have, in my mind, it's a no-brainer. Now, truth be told, pre-briefed this deck with the superintendent and the facilities director. And as we were going through, Mrs. Archambault was on the phone as well. As we were going through it, I kept asking the question, what am I missing? What are we missing? What are the questions that I am not asking that I should be asking, that if I didn't ask, and I did the same thing when I did the facilities tour, that I'm going to be kicking myself and not sleeping at night in a year or 2 or 3 from now, that I have this fiduciary responsibility to ask these questions. And so it's very much an emotional question for all of us, because you put yourselves in the mindset of those parents in Uvalde or in Newtown or wherever, and you say, what could I have done? And in my mind, you can do this. And it is a comparably reasonable cost benefit analysis in my.
I don't want to lose sight of the fact that there are other potential cost savings and benefits to the film, other than just the safety and security, keeping intruders out. There is a potential cost savings to be realized because of the reduced, heat load coming through that window, being trapped in the building. And our systems, let's say at the middle high school, having to work harder to kind of keep up and offset the heat load.
I had a question about that as well, if I may. Which I was just curious because I looked at it and went, oh, great, because a decrease in cooling costs is wonderful and that also gives the benefit for potentially a better physical environment to not have those big areas that are streaming in the heat and become uncomfortable. I apologize. Andrew? No, thank you, sir. Okay, we're not talking right now. Thanks for understanding. How is that, does this cause a notable increase in the wintertime heating needs? Or, I mean, if it has an appreciable effect on cooling, does it have a similar or smaller or greater effect on the heating needs in the winter, because we're not bringing the same level of heat into the buildings?
Typically in the winter, your sun rays are less direct.
Yes.
And you don't get that type of heat load. The last school district I worked for, we had put this in 2 rooms for life skills because of windows were 2 foot off the roof, the sun was glaring, the heat was just bouncing off the roof, and we probably reduced the temp in that room by 15, 18 degrees.
Great.
And, it's to the point where you can put a completely solid one in there, so you can't see inside, which is obviously nothing the police department's gonna want, and it's, the clearer ones are barely noticeable at all, so, I mean, it's twofold.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Anybody else? George, Dave?
My only comment is that, if you think back, a few years, we had a member of the Board of Selectmen that was pushing every day, every week, every month for security stuff like this. So it isn't something we haven't heard about in the past, and we have done very little to move in this direction. I think it's time to really seriously make that move.
George? So do we have any, I mean, so if people are bringing up incidents that don't directly involve this, so do we have any incidents that directly involve this kind of intrusion through? The case that was brought up did not involve anyone, that we walked through a door.
Those are the ones that don't make the news.
Correct, Cindy, shut out the front windows of the door.
In how much time?
I couldn't tell you.
Well,
Seconds.
See, first of all, again, we're judging, I don't disagree with the definition of risk. But, if the probability goes down by some infinitesimal amount, I mean, we could spend all $3 million on only security. And it would reduce the probability, but to what other end? So, I mean, we are here evaluating things, and again, I'm speaking as devil's advocate, not because I'm against this, because I haven't really determined that, because we have to hear everything. It's eventually about prioritization.
Tempered glass is designed to break into thousands and thousands of little pieces.
Right.
It's heated, cooled, and compressed, so you could get a hammer and break a big piece of tempered glass and literally walk right through it.
Right.
2-3 seconds.
Right, but so my point is, but if somebody is intent, if we're talking about people who have malicious intent. And they know that anyway, so there are devices that you could utilize that probably cost not very much money that would do that to this too.
With the window film.
No, it wouldn't shatter into a million pieces.
I mean,
It wouldn't take 2 minutes.
Can I
They're
I think we're trying to, the what ifs and we look at it that way, but, again, I think you have to look at it as an overall comprehensive plan, and part of this is when active shooter incidences happen, when these things are planned out, if you can change that active shooter's goal or plan, even by seconds, it changes what their goal is, and it gives us an opportunity to get there. And when we start talking about costs, absolutely, you got to examine that, and you understand the devil's advocate part of this. But what we're trying to do is give us an opportunity, whether it's through safety film glass or however we do this, is to slow that and change that thought process. right? As soon as you change that plan, it gives us a better opportunity to stop it. And, go back to Uvalde, if that door was secure and he couldn't get in that door, it changes his plan. He started the shooting outside, right? He started firing rounds outside. You change that thought process, you might be talking about a different thing today. And I want to go back to the ripple effect and talk about this. Think about this. We're discussing this now, and we're discussing it about our school systems and district. Didn't happen here. This is a ripple effect that's happening around the country with all the kids, right? We need to do something to make sure they understand we're doing everything we can to make them safe. So their school environment, like Mr. Brennan talked about, is it the safest place they can be? And let's do something to make it to that point.
Anybody else have any comments before we go to the next?
Do we have any efficacy data of this particular a product or similar products that are not provided by the manufacturers? I ask that because much of the data I see, an example, now I don't have the level of access you have to the city hall. But when I see a lot of this brought up frequently, online, everything is brought up by the manufacturers of these products. Look how safe our product is. And I don't trust people who make safety things to tell me how great their safety things are, because that they have a vested interest regardless of communicating something. So do we have, I mean, I don't know how you have data per se directly, but are these products independently lab tested? How are their value figured out?
I'm not a glass expert, I can tell you that. I'm not gonna espouse anyone. I would defer to somebody that's in facilities that understands how, a better understanding of how this works.
Well, I mean.
I don't think we have that data.
No, I'm
Give-
nor am I a glass expert. The product that we're speaking of and the product that I've used before is 3M. And if you have the time to go on YouTube and just look for a 3M safety glass, you'll see plenty of videos, and none of them, not all of them are in a 3M lab.
Great.
They're independently tested. There's plenty of information out there about it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Wonderful.
Before we go to the next one, I just want to make the comment. I don't think there's anybody in the room who's not thinking about providing extra security. I think that I don't want to give the impression that because people are questioning things like this, that they're not interested in providing security to students. So I think, again, there's effectiveness, cost versus effectiveness. That's all what people are questioning. All right. So that gets off to a lively start. Let's go to the next one. Exterior door replacement at Turkey Hill Elementary School. Does anybody need a reminder? Can you give us a brief reminder, or do you want me to go back? Is it small, we're adding?
The need for
The extra-
replacement is due to the antiquated locking system on the
And
door.
it only has a single door, not a double entry, right?
Turkey Hill, we would be looking to build out a vestibule and add a second set of doors for folks to
That
have
to
to
me
get through.
makes absolute sense. And the fact that there's no, well, for many reasons. Again, if you're gonna use the solar savings on the film, then I'll use the energy savings just from having a double entry. Forget about security, which of course is now double. So yes, I have no personal questions on this, but I'll go around. if anybody
Just to
wants.
verify in my mind, the exterior door replacement that we're talking about right now includes the expansion to include a vestibule for Turkey Hill.
Yes, it is.
Okay, fine. I just wanted to be sure it was in that project and not the next part of the next larger project. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions about number 2?
My only other comment on this is, we've all seen, somebody leave the door unlatched for me or something like that, right? Like, those common type of tailgating security issues. And when these things don't latch automatically, that's just inviting that kind of problem. But the other thing that it affects is teachers, right? So if you're an elementary school teacher and you're swarmed by 8 and 9-year-olds and you're trying to get them in line and back into the building after they've been outside or whatever, I would imagine the last thing that you want to think about is after they're all in, going back and making sure that the door is latched. I can imagine, and I thank my lucky stars every day that I didn't choose education as a career, because I don't think I would have survived. But I could imagine forgetting that probably more often than not, because I'm distracted by a couple of dozen 8 and 9-year-olds. So for whatever that's worth, I think that this is one of those things that does, even though it's a big physical thing, does have an automation component to it as well.
And just an additional point, it would be similar to the system that we have at the middle high school. And if doors are propped open, people are receiving alerts that door 12 is not properly closed. So people can monitor that situation.
Given your example, I would say that, and given the discussion of number one, about how prevalent it is on everybody's mind. While I appreciate the anecdote, I probably think that those students, especially hearing, since they're in quote, the front lines, believe me, I'm sure they're not forgetting to pull the door shut. Kind of, probably not, if it's required to pull the door shut. The point is, they should latch if left at an open distance and let go. Problem with some things is that people don't like the slamming, so they stop them. And then they release them with this much room and they just don't have enough power, because otherwise you crush kids if they got killed by that speed. So, self-closing doors is a very interesting proposition, because you want enough thing to close it, but you don't want enough force so that it hurts people if they get caught by it,
Especially kids.
young kids, right? Exactly. Using hands and fingers and things like that. So. Any other thing about number 2?
So just a question, so if those doors get breached, is there any kind of any automation that's alerting like the police station that that's happening?
No,
After hours, the building, once the alarm system is armed, it's monitored by protective services. So at the building, there'll be door contacts and or motion detectors inside the hallways. So whether after hours a motion detector goes off or a door contact is broken, then they get an alarm. They'll contact police for burglar, fire department for fire, and then we have an on-call person on the staff.
Okay,
So much like home security.
Yeah,
Same.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all monitored by central station.
But there is a central station even during the school day. If a door is breached without an authorized card, there's going to be some kind of alerting.
Well, the access control system at the high school, you get notification of what's considered a forced entry if someone uses a key and not an access card to open the door.
so who at the school would be like managing this and monitoring it?
Well, we don't have resources to have someone sit in front of a system to monitor access control and or cameras. So I know at the high school, they usually have the system up because kids are always in and out. But it's not, in my understanding, an audible alarm, but on the screen, it'll show up on the door will turn red to let you know that it's been, again, it's called forced entry, but someone opened up a door without using an access card, they used a key.
Or again, not necessarily open up the door. In Peter's instance, and the superintendent said, well, we'll have a system that it'll say it's ajar, but if nobody's monitoring it, then where's the security?
so
Well-
the principal gets an email, I think it's an email.
Oh, yeah, I think Tim
Notification,
does.
and I think, yeah, somebody in the maintenance department also gets a notification.
After how long?
Yeah.
I think it's,
Well, the forced entry is immediate, and if a door is open longer than 30 seconds, there's also another alarm.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure with this system. I've only been here for a few months, but I know typical systems, that's what it is for token more than 30 seconds as well.
And this would, I think we're on number 3, right?
Not yet.
Okay.
We-
Yeah, 2 and 3 just kind
Very
of.
related.
Yeah, no, it's very good. I think it's
They're very related.
hand in glove with number two.
So we did have a discussion when I was at,
Oh, by the way, officially, let's extend it to number three.
Okay.
So there you
there was a discussion when I did the tour of the middle high school and the elementary school around, you know, where do these cameras terminate and that sort of thing. And you're probably aware because you're on the building committee. And it's a recent build, but they all terminate to a room that is designed to be sort of a command and control
Mhm.
center in the event of an emergency. In Turkey Hill, it all kind of goes back to the secretary's space, I believe, right? Is like, I didn't look at it, but I think that's what was
In
described.
part, so that added wireless camera for a better look at who's at the door. There's an app on her computer,
Today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so that funnels back.
and she buzzes people in
Yeah.
with that visibility, but this would allow for a more modern command capability, right? Because you've got all of these cameras all around the building. You're gonna have greater visibility all centered in the office.
Yeah, I mean, currently, someone in the building, first thing in the morning should open up the software that all the cameras feed image back to, so that it's up and operational for the day. And
So
that's-
for those who don't know, I mean, really, so security is multi-layered. One of the layers is, of course, is capability. You have the capability to do it, but then there's the responsibility. Whose responsibility is it to do it? And having one without the other is equally vulnerable, so. But again, you know, people monitoring it just comes down to resources, which again, comes back to money, so.
The only question that came to mind when you were discussing that was unless I understood this wrong, that it would bring all of these school buildings under the same operating system. Would it be also centrally operated? In other words, if there was a catastrophic crash of the system, then all buildings would be offline, or can the building stand alone?
Well, each,
If that makes sense.
yeah, no, excellent question. So Turkey Hill will be able to monitor their own cameras and take care of access control. Same thing at all 3 schools. So they're independent of each other, but they're all the same system. So I haven't had the conversation with the security vendor yet, but typically for systems, someone at either building will be able to go on and look at cameras in another building as well.
Mhm.
But if the system crashes, like if the hard drive crashes at the high school, you know, the other 2 buildings will still be able to utilize our systems.
I bring that question up because we have a business entity in this region that got hacked a number of weeks ago, and they're still not back up and running. And if you had that type of an event with that system, would the buildings be able to stand on their own?
Yes,
Thank you.
The other benefit of here that Superintendent mentioned, that I do want to emphasize, is access control and centralized access control, right? So we can disenroll somebody in a moment's notice who may have had previously, in the old days, a master key to all the buildings. And with a couple of keystrokes, that master key is no longer in effect. Which, you know, in my mind, again, coming from IT security, where that's often forgotten when somebody leaves an organization and you forget to disenroll them from their email and all their applications. This is something that once it comes on, I would imagine we'll create an SOP for, and we'll have that.
yeah, there's Kate, you know, mentioned first responders. You know, right now, you know, this is my world. I got 3.
Yeah, which
access
one?
cards. Well, so for them, they're gonna have 2 cards in their cruisers, well, 3. You know, if they're responding to anything at Passios. You know, it's in the dark, you're running, you know, you're gonna put big labels on it, you know, that, so it's, you know, it simplifies the process.
a list of items, because this talks about video cameras and other security devices. They're actually a spreadsheet of items, like how many video cameras are we looking at here, or is this just like, how is the money, how is the sum gotten to?
I'll have to go back and look at the proposal I got from Signet. I know, I believe they do list devices.
We'd like to.
So I
would
know
like to see.
cameras, not sure about doors or access at the doors or contacts at the doors, but I remember seeing at least a list of how many cameras they were adding.
And that's all, and by the way, I don't want brands, I don't want.
Oh, no.
All I want is, how many video cameras are we talking about? You know, how many card readers, like, just so we know, hey, we're getting this.
Yeah, and a lot of the cost is running all new communication wires to every new device, so that's probably gonna be the majority of the cost, not the actual devices we're installing, so.
Town manager has a quote on that too.
Oh, okay, good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Assuming this project goes forward and is done as proposed right at the moment. Are there gonna be other older components working alongside, or is that all coming out?
It's all coming out.
Okay, that's fine. That was.
Every last one of them. Well, that's the issue we have, to program someone's access card or to give you a 5-digit code. Oh, no, I'm sorry, this building's only 6 digits. So, you have to literally go to each keypad and
Right.
punch and punch and punch. So it simplifies the process. The systems will auto arm every night, just in case, not that it happens, but,
And I'm assuming the access
Crystal.
code will also have time parameters about when certain people can get in.
oh, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
I just want to say, as much as I try to wrap my mind around the actual cost benefit of things like the safety glass, oh, I'm so enthused about this idea. In terms of eliminating so much of the human error and human intent from problems that could be occurring.
And I would add to that, I mean, to remove the disparity between the codes of the different buildings for the first responders to have single access. I mean, that of course makes all the sense.
One last question. Will this system be connected in any way directly to either dispatch center or the police station? Because
No, I mean, it'll be handled just like,
this really isn't a security system, it's more, okay,
it's the same with the burglar alarm and the fire alarm. It goes to dispatch is either gonna dispatch the police or the fire department.
Yeah.
And then call our personnel.
okay. I just remember in some of the conversations that, direct notification of emergency services also saves a minute and a half, 2 minutes, whatever, for somebody to get to a phone or use their cell or whatever.
I can't.
I just
speak to
bring the
this,
question
But
up.
having a home security system. The fire, like smoke detectors and everything, would automatically, regardless of time of day, notify dispatch of a
Right.
fire issue. I don't know what, assuming there's carbon monoxide detectors and of course, smoke detector. The police one is usually, okay, it would have to be after hours, but to be immediate, otherwise it's gonna assume some response by somebody first. So.
Yeah.
Except on like holiday weekdays should be considered like holidays. Or it should be considered like weekends or at night.
After hour type.
So it's all programmed.
Yeah.
If the system is armed, then it will notify. If it's not armed, then you have like a door ajar kind of situation, which your alarm system is noting that you have a door ajar. That won't trigger an alarm necessarily.
Yeah, if the door's open, you can't even on the system.
Right, exactly.
So I mean, we used to get nuisance calls at one of the high schools on the motion detector on the second floor. I would say, well, don't dispatch the police. How did someone get to the second floor and not setting off any?
After we were adjusting our system, Lunenburg's finest have visited my home.
As you were saying that, I was reminded, I went to school in Lunenburg, and back in the day, we had a home ec program in what is now Turkey Hill. It was a middle school. And I can't tell you how many times we evacuated that building.
Oh, it was-
Whatever. So, fun times.
TC Passios used to be the same way when they first started installing motion detectors, because the air handlers that are in the rooms would come on
Yeah,
at
blow
1
up the
o'clock in the
test
morning
And
and
blow
blow
up.
something
Yeah.
hanging from the ceiling around, and boom, alarm goes off.
I've heard ones where people had parties and they had helium balloons.
Oh, yeah.
Air handlers would blow the balloons in place of the.
But you can't get them because on the second floor atrium. Yeah. That's good.
Any more for number 3? Number 4, I am going to predict with my Kreskin-like ability that no one's gonna have really terribly many questions about replacing a, what is it? 50-year-old system, 40-year-old system?
Almost.
I'm almost positive I know the answer to this one. I feel the need to ask if the fire department's weighed in on this in some capacity.
We had many conversations with the fire department over the Labor Day weekend, actually, about the fire alarm system.
Great.
There was a critical failure.
Oh, yeah, then even more so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My only question, and it's a little outside the purview of this project, but it is similar, and that is the primary school system that we went around and around about 2 years ago or so. Has that been satisfied for the time being?
It
But
seems to
we'll
be.
see a project like this in the near future for that building also. I'm assuming.
We'll keep a monitor on the systems, and when we start to see issues, we'll have to bring it forward again. But for right now, we're not having issues.
Okay. Thank you.
So that system, the information that I've gathered on it is it's a Frankenstein. It's now Frankenstein.
Yeah.
So it's old enough. We, we had a colossal failure of the panel this year. Had to have round the clock fire protection on
What is
site.
it? Which school are you talking?
Turkey Hill.
Okay,
Yeah. So we had the fire department over for Labor Day weekend in Turkey Hill this year. And,
And our custodians
Yeah, we have
really
custodians only in the
Yeah.
fire department.
oh, okay.
24/7.
Over the years, like, there's different requirements for pillboxes, they
Yeah.
change and stuff like that, but a lot of them are still original. Then you've got Americans with Disabilities Acts, and you've got 2 pulls, one's lower than the other, you don't have enough. Smoke detectors, and the other thing to keep in mind in this building is there's no sprinklers in this building. So.
And it
anything
is
that
a
we can-
project in the out years that might
Yeah,
become,
but
nearby
anything that
years.
we can do to make this thing safer. But, and part of the problem is, Dave and I have discussed many times in finance committee, is when you get these Frankenstein systems that are really old and something breaks, finding the replacement part is not a guarantee.
Right. Well,
And,
that's what your predecessor made us aware of many times, that you
Mhm.
try to locating the parts.
Yeah. And we get super lucky with that panel, with this particular system, because that could have been a really big
Yeah,
problem.
the only parts available were on eBay.
I was gonna say, thank God.
Yeah.
Same thing for the primary school system. I'm
Which is
familiar with it
really-
because
which
I
is a
have
little
all the specs
concerning.
on it.
Was it?
Because that's a
Only
lot,
20 years old.
right, exactly, it's barely 20 years old.
It's insane.
Well, at least with primary, it's not that old where you can put in a new panel. And new smoke detectors, use the same wiring, everything's addressable. After 20 some odd years, you really should start looking at replacing smoke detectors.
Right, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Anybody else for number 4? Number 5, athletic complex feasibility study. How old is the current, is the current field? The turf?
The last appropriation on it was made at town meeting in 2006. But the project was already underway. If you recall, so.
But that was the initiation of the field, but we have
No, it
changed.
wasn't. So what happened was fundraising for that started in the late 90s.
No, yes, I realize
Yeah.
that too.
And there, the fundraising basically got exhausted. The project had started, most of the work was done with in-kind
Yeah.
donations. And there was an appropriation made basically to complete it at the 2006 annual town
Correct.
meeting.
Correct.
So to the best of my recollection, that project was completed somewhere around 2007,
But the turf had been replaced since then.
already once.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Right, right. No, so the turf is, and And the. Also, the concessions and some of the bleachers was not, that wasn't part of the initial plan, that was added when we did. Built the school, I believe.
I think the bleachers were in, but I think you're right about the concession.
You know, the concession stand and some of the block walling I thought was done, because there used to be this slope by the bleachers where there was just brush and it was just never cleaned up and this wall was put in, so.
The top along the driveway.
Right.
That wall, you're absolutely correct.
The wall that the superintendent in the presentation showed, I think was built when the school was built.
There were
No.
2 walls.
There's 2 walls. That wall was there.
Okay.
That was part of the original.
That's why I'm
construction.
asking,
The
so,
wall that goes down the driveway toward the concession stand, so if you're coming from the press booth toward Kevin's gate,
yep,
the wall on your left that kind of people stand on when they're watching the game, that wall was built with the school.
yeah, okay. Which is only now, 5 or 6 years old.
I think we're in year 7 functioning.
I've got to make this comment just because I'm aware of it, and I'm not against the feasibility study to see how much this complex is going to need in dollar amount repairs to bring it back to, say, what it was when it opened and enhanced. But a number of years ago, as the Turkey Hill Middle School at the time conversation was starting to heat up, one of the scenarios for replacement and or renovation of that facility was to take this athletic complex and wear it out to its very end, rip it out, build a new school there, and then build a new athletic complex. In other words, swap their positions.
Yep.
And, there may be some feasibility in that. It's been a lot of years since that project was considered or talked about. It was never considered. It was just bantered back and forth. But I think finding out the cost first. And that was also part of the group that really didn't want an artificial turf field. They wanted a natural grass field.
So I went back, I was looking at some agendas and found some video of discussions that were happening during the building committee years. In fact, Tom, you were on one of the videos that I saw earlier today when I was
I
looking at it.
apologize.
And there was, you hold up pretty well. You've done pretty well over the years. But there was a lot of discussion also about what are now the grass fields. And should they be turf or not? Because there was, some excess money and should we be spending it on that and that sort of thing. That complex, though, should not be in the condition that it's in. I mean, it's only arguably 15 years old. The turf has been replaced. But, as I've said in many public meetings, I spend an inordinate amount of time standing on sidelines and in those bleachers and in that press box. Last year, there was a youth football game in a deluge, and what the superintendent described of the carpet lifting up and kids literally running on a floating carpet was insane. It was like, I can't believe I'm actually watching this happen.
It's like running on a water bit.
It literally was. And the other thing that happens in those circumstances is that it really messes with the lifespan of the turf, because all of those rubber granules float in the direction of the water, and then they need to be redistributed if they are, and if you have the right equipment and all that kind of thing. So that property, so that facility was obviously built before the new middle high school. And it was built, it was designed, but it was built largely with volunteer work. And then when the high school was built, I'm not sure that the drainage plan for the facility adequately accommodated the need for the drainage that the new middle high school has brought to bear on that facility. And so what you see with those rock, those concrete blocks and the brick, it's just drainage. It's just water backing up. And then when it finally drains down, the ground settles below it and the support system comes apart. So, and the information in terms of, you know, what is in fact there and whether it's working properly, clearly it isn't. But the details are ambiguous and we need to find out what's going on under there. When we built this, there was a lot of discussion at the time around parity, right? So this was in a time when school departments around our area were investing in artificial turf and new athletic facilities. It was the dawn of school choice and those kinds of things. And we were above par when we put this facility in. I can tell you now, going to a lot of high school football games, we are slightly below par in terms of a lot of the campuses that I've been on over the last couple of years. There are some old favorites. St. Bernard's is still there. I was at West Boylston last weekend, and that's like 1970s era and very charming, I might add. But I mean, I would encourage everybody to go up to Air Shirley High School and look what they put in. It is magnificent. And I think we owe it to ourselves, but obviously to our kids to try to keep this place up. Because if you're going to run a good scholastic athletic program, and I think we've got, one of the best in the area when you balance it in terms of all the teams, all the sports we offer, we need to keep this thing up. And it's beginning to fall apart.
So when this was completed, it was what you just said about the Air Shirley one, so.
Yeah, it was.
So,
Yeah.
and it did not have these problems, so this is. Again, I don't have children in the school and I go to some games, but I certainly do not attend games in the deluge. I am not forced to without children being there. So this is the first time hearing that. So when did this start? Like at what point did the flooding?
So that's a good question. And
Not that it matters. about
Yeah,
the
I'm probably the
I would
most-
like to know.
I spent the most time there over the years in terms of people in the room, so I'll probably, I started to notice the fencing along in front of the press box start to lean forward probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And I wasn't involved in discussions about it at the time, but just as a casual observer, you would notice that the thing is leaning the wrong way, right around that time. So it's been a bit.
I mean, when you get pictures like this, where that is the drain part and the water is on top of the drain.
Something.
Again, I'm not a hydrogeologist, but I don't think that's a design system that's working. I grew up, going to New York, where there were plenty of floods right over the sewer. The sewer inlet, and it's like, okay, why isn't the water going in the sewer? Why isn't it staying above? So,
Fortunately, it's not coming out the other way.
well, that just gets into another area. Then we'd be in front of the Board of Health. Well, let's not talk about that. So, yeah, again, the study, I agree with your comments, and obviously it's people invested a lot of money and a lot of time. And again, we were able to host many division and league events because of the turf, and we do owe it to ourselves. I mean, what's the point of the investment if you don't keep it, upkeep it? So we do need to know that. None of this, does this cost involve replacing the track surface and the.
We don't know what it's gonna involve, because when you uncover what's the issue that's causing this problem, and you figure out what the solution is, it may then impact the drainage around around the track and the turf. What are we talking about there? We don't know.
Fair.
It's like you start to pull on one thread and we just don't know how far it's gonna go, which is why we think it's important to do the study, figure out what needs to be repaired, how it might be repaired, maybe there are options. And can we tackle renovation and repair in a phased approach, and what would those phases have to be? What would have to come first?
Sure.
What's connected to something else that can't be done separately? We're gonna need experts to come in and tell us. We just don't know how far this is gonna go.
I think the most important thing And the study is going to be what's causing the problem.
Mhm.
You know, we're talking about water. I've been in this town way too long, but, people that raised me in this town told me stories of a brook that is buried under the school property. It used to be above ground. And it comes off of Turkey Hill, goes underneath, and I don't know how it was buried, but it ended up underground over the years. And that's why you have water coming out from under the bleachers down on the front football fields down into the lower driveway. That is that brook breaking back out of the ground again. So the field that the school was built on, I don't remember what the high water mark was on the ground, in the ground there, but it was extremely high. There was a softball field there that was totally useless in the spring until the waters receded from the melt off and the spring rains. So you're working with an area that is probably saturated also with just groundwater.
So it
So,
was also rising groundwater in town.
yeah, oh yeah, in general.
Everything Dave just described, you know, having been a student athlete there, like spent many a practice in ankle deep water on the field, which is now the school.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Any other questions about the complex?
I love the history.
Yeah, I was gonna
Funny, well.
advise the committee that we better keep on target, because otherwise this will be like another,
Later, I have another.
the red book of the history of Lunenburg we'll have at the end of this, so let's not do that. New pickup truck.
Yes, I have some questions about this. Okay, we're specing a 3/4 ton pickup truck. Add a sander onto it and add a load of sand, salt, or whatever you're gonna put in that hopper. What's the load capacity you're putting on that truck? I can't believe 3/4 ton is heavy enough.
I mean, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, anything I see commercially out there is a 1-ton pickup or bigger. I think it's a bad move to overweight a brand new 3/4 ton truck. There's some, I have another side to it, and that is that I understand I was gonna say perceived need, but it's a need. It's just, I don't think it's a extremely strong need to augment equipment to cover for the DPW. The DPW, in my history here in town, the DPW bends over backwards to the school district to make sure, and yes, there have been some lapses in certain years and in the past. And who knows what'll happen going forward. This may be considered an insurance policy that it's not gonna happen again. At the moment, I'm not totally convinced that it's a necessary need. And as you guys put it, as your lowest priority, I'm not sure exactly why you put it there, other than the fact that the other priorities have their own, standalone and importance in their own right.
Mhm.
That's my feel right now.
So I can't speak to the equipment. We're also, I believe it's replacing a dump truck, right? In terms of. how we're
Yeah, the
presenting
pickup
this.
of
Yeah.
replacing the,
Yeah.
Right.
the old
So,
one ton.
it's a different truck for a different purpose.
Mhm.
The phenomenon that the superintendent described of the late night event that gets out and it's glare ice out there, I've experienced too many times to count. It's a very common scenario. And maybe that's an operational issue between the administration and the DPW where, a little bit more planning or something. But I just don't know what the capacity is of the DPW. I haven't done that work, but I can attest to the phenomenon of trying to walk out the front door of that building and whoa, or somebody, from the administration goes out and they sand the sidewalk, but as soon as you get on the driveway, you're on an ice rink. And that's a relatively common phenomenon after theater events, basketball games, any kind of late night events, particularly at the middle high school. For whatever it's worth. And I do think that it's something we gotta figure out one way or another.
And that assumes that you've got somebody on site during those events or at the end of those
Yeah.
events that's gonna be able to operate the equipment.
Absolutely right.
Yep.
It's a, you know, level of, you know, how many times removed, right? So in this case, somebody from the school department absolutely needs to be available and on call to be able to do that if this thing is gonna have any value. Versus, and they work for the superintendent and for Mr. Pusateri versus if somebody works for the DPW and the DPW's got other stuff to deal with,
Mhm.
right? Particularly on a
So,
icy night.
right, so I would say that, you know, given the technology of the time, that weather is fairly predictable. Like you don't go out where it's supposed to be beautiful and all of a sudden it's slick. So generally you have some inkling that there is some problem, and then for that event, the school department would be able to request that somebody on their own staff be available. And to what Mr. Beardmore said, if it was weather that was a problem, one would guess unless they have a localized storm right over Middle's High School, it probably is the whole town. And that the DPW is gonna be otherwise occupied on the roads likelihood, so, you know, it makes sense to do it. As far as for the size of the truck, I hear your point, but it's also not designed to, you know, sand the streets of Lunenburg. It's designed to sand the school properties.
It's
So
probably
it could be-
3/4 of a mile.
Right, so it could be half full, you don't have to fill the sand and salt to its capacity, because there's no point in doing it. So, I mean, I see the need and to replace a rusting out 115,000 mile hand-me-down. I don't think there's too much to ask.
So in your inventory, that you have now, do you have like any of the larger Kubota tractors that you could outfit it with one of these Salters?
We've got a smaller John Deere diesel gator that has a small sander on it, but only holds 200 pounds.
That's a sidewalk sander.
Yeah, but they actually, no, I'm not gonna get it. So yeah, we do have a small sidewalk sander, but it only holds 200 pounds.
Okay. And this hand-me-down truck, is that being driven over the streets? Town streets?
Yeah, they're both registered. They're all registered and insured.
And this would replace it, that would be retired, is that correct? It's not added to the fleet.
We're not
Yeah.
handing it down to anyone else.
You know, that is a mandatory question on capital planning, we're not adding to the fleet, we're replacing. them.
I don't know if
Yes.
anybody
You
remembers.
have 3 trucks, and when you get done with this,
We'll
you'll
have
have
3
3
trucks.
trucks. Okay,
That truck, just again, historical, replaced one that was in 10 times worse shape. That the school department was operating at the time, and it was being retired from DPW. So instead of waiting through the process of purchase, that was transferred to the school district to get them through a few years. And here we are.
now I will say, and I feel obliged to say this because it came up last year during our capital planning. Is that the school department for their vehicles, especially vehicles that operate in the winter that have sand and salt. Really needs a maintenance plan and a cleaning plan, because it was clear to us from our correspondence with the department of the schools last year that that was not really being maintained. And-
We've already had
Well,
that
I'm,
conversation.
Okay, good. Well, if you've had it, that's good. I
We've had
want
it.
the people who are listening to know that we've had it too.
I'm a stickler for keeping vehicles maintained. That's, you know, so we're not gonna let that thing sit with salt and rust on it for a week and a half before we do it.
In a perfect world, you'd have a wash down bay, but we can't afford something like that. So,
I don't know if the DPW hasn't, I haven't talked to Bill yet.
yeah, I don't believe so, but I don't.
That was actually gonna be a very related question. Does the school department, either on its own or with partnerships with DPW or what have you, have the ability to maintain the sander as well as load it to whatever capacity is needed in a timely and convenient way?
We've been having those discussions with DPW.
Great, wonderful. Thank you.
Any other questions about the truck? Any other questions at all in closing for this? I want to thank both of you for coming and doing an excellent presentation and engaging in a good discussion with the committee.
Yeah.
I hear none.
My only comment is that thank you again for the information that's in this entire report and the more extensive out years information, because as Dr. Burnham knows, something that I keyed into in a report that came out of Turkey Hill Elementary was a comment by staff that the building was deficient, but there was never any identification of what those deficiencies were. This starts to give us a vision as to what the deficiencies are.
Their largest area of concern is the lack of electrical outlets in a classroom. In a modern classroom with a lot of technology, having two outlets, one at either end of the room, presents some significant challenges for teaching today. So
But
that
it-
that is one of their largest.
But at
areas
least
of
we're getting
concern.
those down on into a spreadsheet type
Mhm.
format, and we're seeing what the needs are. And whether we go with a total renovation, like is kind of laid out there, the way the capital plan has got the asterisks on it, or a rebuild, at least we're analyzing the
Yeah.
information.
I also want to thank the police department, Chief Gamble and Officer McNamara for, the support of the security items that the school presented. Thank you for attending. Okay. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. Good to
you
meet
all for your
everybody.
time.
If we have any questions, please funnel them through me, the members, and then I will get them to the superintendent or the school facilities director.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have, that was the discussion part after the presentation, so it's action items for next meeting. Our next meeting is going to be, next meeting is facilities on Monday. For town facility. What? November 7th, yeah, not this, Monday, 2 Mondays. Oh, that, I was thinking it was Monday, but it's not. Yeah, I'm due for Monday. But anybody have any, first of all, everybody should have received from the town manager, the criteria.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to go over that yet, but
So-
I did receive it. Yeah.
So if we want, I can put that, if we want to review that again, I can put that on next week's agenda, next meeting's agenda.
I think it might be good to have it there. I'm not.
Well, if we bypass
Yeah.
it, that's fine. If everybody says that we're fine with it, then good, but everybody please do
I
that.
still have this whole thing around phases and engineering and that kind of thing is still kind of rattling around my head. And I
Right,
haven't
well,
resolved it. I may never.
yeah, no, I mean, to put it in a programming, I just had a meeting with a colleague today, and when you get into programming something, there's multiple ways to do it.
Right.
So there's different ways of reviewing everything.
So one, and I just want to throw this out to the committee really, and or the chair and or town manager. The discussion that we had last week around the play of the special purpose stabilization fund. I know that that's out of scope for the task of this committee. But the fact of the matter is that there are some other issues associated with capital planning this year. The special purpose stabilization fund and ARPA. That are like the elephants in the room, and I think, they need to be put into some sort of context in terms of what they really mean. And a scenario or a likely scenario in terms of how the special purpose stabilization account will be applied, whether it's just a matter of if the ambulance hits, then we're gonna, fund the capital plan article. We're gonna make the special purpose stabilization fund one of the funding sources. That's a perfectly acceptable answer, but I'd like some guidance in terms of a likely scenario there.
So I will say, to reiterate one portion of what you said, is it is out of scope.
I understand that.
And that the funding mechanism is handled in many different places, first and foremost from the town manager. And the finance committee gets to discuss it, whether they recommend it or not, and talk with the town manager. The select board certainly gets to discuss it. But it's got to start from there. If the town manager wants to offer anything as guidance as you requested, that's certainly her prerogative, but I don't necessarily see it as a.
Again, I'm not suggesting that we have the authority to demand this,
Okay.
we don't.
Right, okay.
But what I'm describing is a situation where the good people of Lunenburg have, in good faith, funded this account for this exact circumstance. And we have an item that not only appears on the capital plan, but also appears on the ARPA request. And I just think that it complicates matters. I understand the task in terms of prioritization, but I think that in this circumstance, that complicates matters, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be given some sort of indication as to how this is likely to go.
Sure, well, the select board is gonna be taking up the ARPA funds soon. So some of those decisions, maybe not all of it, but some of those decisions will be made at that point, and they'll be public. I'm just saying that for the purposes of this committee, I understand wanting to have all the information, but funding is not the priority of the committee.
We understand.
Okay, good, all right, it's not even secondary.
The other piece about the stabilization funds, especially the special purpose stabilization fund, is that, you know, we always talk about, well, it's for this, that, or the other thing. But at the end of the day, in town meeting has the right to pull money from that account for just about anything in the budget or an article.
Well, not, I mean, there's parameters, but yes, they can certainly use it as a funding source. As an amendment, if they don't like the way it's
Best
done.
practices are that we use it for what we always say it's intended for,
Right,
but it's revenue that is available to town meeting.
It's also a 90% vote.
to get it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and again, with the town manager in the room, I will say that I trust the town manager's judgment, and she has served the town very well in exercising that judgment on things financial, so. I don't want to get too far astray of, making requests. We can make all the requests we want, or individuals can, but I'm just saying it's not really part of the scope of the swim lane that we're in to ask. That. So. All right. Any other action items that people want to see on next meeting? Everybody who's new to this committee should be running this in your head and start making notes about what we're seeing. So that when we get to the, I can't remember the exact number, 30 some odd items that we're going to be asked to prioritize, that you get a good sense without having to go back. I mean, of course, I encourage reruns of the 2 hours we've been through together, if you would like to do that, but if you're taking notes, it's gonna be a whole lot easier to prioritize. Okay, so the next meeting, Monday, November 9th. November 7th, I'm sorry. And there will be an additional item for approving minutes, which everybody should have received from Amanda, who was gracious enough to do this for us. That being said, any public comment from the committee?
No.
Any public comment from the public? Ms. Lizio.
Rhonda Lucia, 181 Reservoir Road. I just had some questions about the safety film. Obviously, I didn't, I'm asking it now, so maybe someone could ask it in the future.
Sure.
Now, there was a claim that this film may decrease the cooling costs. My understanding is the safety film district-wide is only on the first floor of all of the buildings, so I just question how much of a cost savings that would be. As far as reducing the cooling costs when you're not treating the second floor windows. I also noticed there was a price increase on that item. Originally at the school committee meeting, it was $130,000. Now they're saying $160,000. As well as the exterior door on the Turkey Hill Elementary School went from $120,000 to $160,000. So I don't know why that is.
There is an answer to that.
If you have the answer, I would.
Heather, do you have it, or
The reason for
the last, the
Why did they say
secondary email that we got?
it was presented to the school committee. Maybe a week and a half ago.
Right.
That had to do with the quote.
Yeah,
Yeah, the quotes came in.
I can say definitively that there were quotes pending, so some of that represented quotes that were a little old. And they had requested updates on those quotes, and they weren't all in at the point of that school committee meeting. And I believe that the chair and the superintendent determined that it would be in everybody's best interest to put the latest information.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I wanted to go on record as saying, I am opposed to funding the safety film on the buildings. I don't think it provides a measurable impact on school safety. And I also question why taxpayers are being asked to fund item which only have the potential to delay entry into the buildings in a best case scenario, instead of expanding the resource officer program, which is already successful in one of the buildings and practically guarantees immediate response to an intruder. In the case of school safety, I question whether any capital item can achieve the goal better than and more effectively than a staff member or multiple staff.
Thank
Thank
you for the comment. As far as your first comment, as far as the solar thing, I think if you have 100% reason about why they're proposing this, I think 5% is the solar energy part and 95 is for security. If I had a guess, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think that was a subsequent thing. And yes, I thought that same thing as you did. If you're putting it on only some of the windows in some of the places, the effect of the energy savings, cooling or heating otherwise is going to be minimal or maybe potentially negligible. But that's not what they're asking. They presented it as a security issue. Any other public comment from the public? I want to make sure I look at Zoom. Nobody on Zoom. So yes.
My most important question. So in having the opinion that the staff would be the best way to increase safety. I'm curious about, is there currently an officer in the training program? And is that a program that we're looking to expand, especially based on the fact that it's been so successful in the one building that we have the program at? And so I guess my problem is the order of the way we're doing things. My preference would be to have an officer in the building first, and then perhaps over time, increase the other safety aspects to fortify the building.
So I will just add a response that question, while pertinent for your decision-making and certainly a reasonable question, is out of the purview of this. We are here to judge the capital requests. Capital, first of all, requests that come into it. So I cannot speak to why resource officer is not or is not on their plan. I would suggest you take that to the school committee and ask them, because that is certainly their plan.
I will do that.
Yes, and that is not a question we would go back and ask them. We're just here to evaluate and prioritize the capital request that they did supply to us.
Thank you, sorry.
No problem.
Again.
Good points.
Any comments from the town manager?
No, we have 29 projects requests for fiscal 24.
Thank you for correcting.
3,174,600.
Say again.
3,174,610.
That's actually a lot less than last year.
I think we just write the check right now.
Change.
The percentage split between requests is 30% school, 28% public works, 24% fire, and 20% facilities.
Seems like a good split too.
And 0% police
Zero
For this year.
last year.
I mean, ebbs and flows, everything.
Oh, yeah.
There are biorhythms to everything.
And
Some people peak
To
in
their
there.
credit, they're getting a lot more use out of some of those vehicles than I ever anticipated.
Okay.
Yeah,
The
I-
K9 one in particular,
Yeah.
thing takes a lick and keeps on ticking, so.
Okay, with that in mind, the only thing we have left is adjournment. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I second. All right, let's do a roll call, Mr. George, Mr. Martin,
Aye.
Mr. Passios,
I,
Mr. Beardmore.
Aye.
Mr. Brenner.
Hi.
And an aye for myself. Good night, everyone, and we will see you on November 7th.
thank you. No, I don't know if Parks had a meeting tonight or not. I told them I may not make it,
It'll be tough, yeah.
and I didn't.
Hey, Andrew.